Welcome in, guys. It is Friday, and y'all know what that means. This is Britt's Fantasy Blitz, and I, of course, am your host, Britt Flinn. We had a great Thursday night football game last night. I've got to admit, I was a little bit concerned about how slow it started off, but it turned into a real barn burner and pretty exciting. So we're going to recap that throughout the course of the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're going to try to get to all of your start-sit questions. If we don't get to them throughout the course of the show, message us in the Fantasy Alarm Discord, message me on Twitter at Britt_Flynn, or join us, me and John and Pemba, at 9 a.m. Eastern on Sunday morning on the Better Sports Network for our Start Sit show, and we will get to those questions there. But we've got a lot to talk about, as always. Thank you, as always, to our producer, Ernie Acosta. We are going to recap the Thursday night football game. We're going to talk a little about injuries. We are going to talk about some week 2 underdog props, and we will be joined by Kyle Lindemann of Rotoballer to talk about some of the week 1 running back leaders and play a very special game of Behind the Door. So with that, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll just get right to it. Angie, Hal, Michelle, great to see you guys all in the chat. We'll get to your question in just a little bit, Michelle. But let's go ahead and talk about the Thursday night game between the Eagles and the Vikings. The Eagles did come away with the win 34-28, but they didn't necessarily look like the powerhouse team like they did last year. And before I get into the game, I just want to say, if I see one more person whining about that fumble into the end zone and it being called a touchback, listen, don't fumble the ball and you won't be penalized for it. You shouldn't be rewarded for fumbling by getting the ball back where you dropped it. Imagine if that was the rule. People would be out there swatting the ball like it's water polo, causing chaos everywhere. The rule is what it is, and people just need to live with it and stop whining. All right, I'm stepping off my soapbox and getting to the actual game. So first off, DeAndre Swift absolutely crushed it. I will fully admit, I told people that I was concerned and worried about his usage, that I thought that this would be a full-on committee, and I was wrong. Swift carried the ball for 28 times for 175 yards and a touchdown. He also had 3 receptions for some yardage. It did help that Boston Scott went out with a concussion and that Kenneth Gainwell didn't play, but this is still a very encouraging sign if you bought the dip on Swift during your fantasy football drafts. In a tale as old as time, the Vikings' turnover struggles continued. They coughed up the ball 4 times. And surprisingly, one of those wasn't a Kirk Cousins interception, which we've grown to not necessarily know and love, but just expect on primetime games. It's just like death and taxes. I feel like in a primetime Vikings game, it's death, taxes, and Vikings turnovers. Justin Jefferson looked very good against Darius Slay, finishing with 159 yards on 11 receptions, but he still doesn't have a touchdown on the season. These are somehow going to Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne, TJ Hawkinson had 2 touchdowns in this game, and yet Jefferson still can't seem to find the end zone. I think his time is coming, but it's still just a little irritating for fantasy managers to see that ceiling capped and see him not get into the end zone. DFS Money Train, hello to you too as well. So on the Eagles side, A.J. Brown has really not been able to create much chemistry with Jalen Hurts throughout the first 2 games. He would have had that touchdown had it not been for that Rashad Penny holding penalty that got called back. But other than that, it wasn't a super exciting game for him. And this resulted in a fairly heated exchange between Brown and Hurts along the sidelines, which Hurts later had to address in the after-game media portion, saying that everyone wants to make plays, and he was just a little frustrated. I mean, sure, that's true, but when you have a wide open receiver and you choose to ignore them over and over and over, it's going to cause frustration. I know it's hard to say that the Eagles looked off when they did score as many points as they did last night, but something is not sitting right in that offense. Hurts does not look as comfortable and as dialed in as he had in the past. Watching him go through his progressions, there were a couple times that Dallas Goedert was wide open. Had he gotten that ball out more quickly to Goddard, he could have gone upfield and moved the chains, but yet he didn't. He just seems hesitant. And there's something going on in that offense. And speaking of not sitting right, I'm not the only one that believes this or thinks this. There was an article out this morning with the headline, "Should the Eagles be concerned about Hurts?" I think there may be something to that. He's getting sacked, he's throwing interceptions, he looks hesitant when he runs. There's just something that's off about him. And maybe it's the loss of Shane Steichen, but Hurts doesn't seem to have that same impact on this Eagles offense that he did last season instead of just letting the run game take over like he did last night. Nick Sirianni himself actually addressed the issues, but obviously he said those issues are easier to fix when you're 2-0. So we'll see what happens going forward in the season, but it doesn't look like the same Super Bowl caliber team that we saw last year. Hello, Albert. Hello, Skinny McKinney. I'm with you. I'm not convinced that when all the Eagles running backs are healthy, that it's not going to be a committee situation week to week. I think that with Boston Scott going out with that concussion, we were already seeing a lot more of him. And then they just started to mix Swift back in. I think that you should be a little bit dialed back in your expectations on Swift because I still think that this is going to be more of a committee situation than it is a full on workhorse back, despite what the snap counts suggest. So let's get into some top news of the week. Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers had successful surgery to repair his torn Achilles. Now it's on to the rehab, but having him on the sideline to coach and mentor Zach Wilson could still help the Jets in their offense. Now, I will say, if they have any hope for getting any wins during the season, that offensive line is really going to have to step up. We saw them get absolutely decimated by the Bills. That's what caused Aaron Rodgers to suffer that Achilles injury because the Bills pressured him on all three of their dropbacks. Having that mentorship in Aaron Rodgers is going to be fine, but if that offensive line doesn't step up, it's going to be rough going for a little while. Speaking of a little bit of a rough going, after a bit of a split in the Texans' backfield, offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick of the Texans said that Dameon Pierce should see the ball more in week 2. Pierce only saw a 47.4% snap share in week 1. He only carried the ball 11 times, and that loss was pretty bad. We were all of the opinion after the preseason that Pierce was going to be the workhorse, that Singletary was only going to be in as a pass catching back, and that just didn't come to pass. Now, I'm not so sure that that was a result of how they wanted to run their offense or just because of the game script, because they were getting beat by the Ravens so badly, but it is something to keep an eye on and to be a little bit encouraged by as a Dameon Pierce fantasy manager. So let's run down some of this injury news real quick because, guys, it's only week 2, but these injuries keep rolling in and rolling in. And it's too early for this, in my frank opinion. The big ones for me, Aaron Jones and Christian Watson are still not practicing with hamstring issues, and their availability for Sunday is very up in the air, especially according to one of the Packers beat writers who said that Aaron Jones' absence at practice is very concerning. Wide receiver Romeo Dubs was also limited in practice Thursday. If he doesn't go, I think that this opens the door wide open for Luke Musgrave and some more of those younger assets on the Packers passing attack, like potentially Jaden Reed and even Samare Toure. So we'll have to monitor that closely. In some good news for all of us who went early tight end, Travis Kelce remained limited at practice, but the hope is that he will be ready to go against the Jaguars on Sunday. Austin Eckler also wasn't at practice on Thursday for the media portion of practice, and the Chargers did elevate a player from the practice squad. So that doesn't really bode well for his chances of starting in week 2. If you were one of the lucky ones who got Josh Kelly or you read my waiver wire article over at fantasyalarm.com and got him, I think that he is a straight plug and play this week for this matchup if Eckler doesn't go. So keep a close eye on that one as well. Titans wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins has also missed 2 consecutive days of practice with an ankle injury, and it's not exactly looking good for him to start. Treylon Burks missed Wednesday with a personal day, but he was back in practice yesterday. But looking at the way that Ryan Tannehill was so hesitant to throw the ball, I don't know if you can rely on any of these pass catchers. I think that this game is going to be much more Derrick Henry centric. And I'm not going to mention my dream that I had last night of him tearing his ACL in this game, because that is just bad juju. Other tight end news, Darren Waller was limited with a hamstring issue. It is the same hamstring that kept him out of several games last season, but he doesn't expect that to be a long-term issue. It's still something to watch because, as we know, all soft tissue injuries can kind of re-aggravate themselves, become more severe over the course of a season. But right now, it looks like it's something that he's just going to play through. All right, guys, if you bet a lot of fab on Puka Nacua, this is time to put your earmuffs on. Puka Nacua did not practice yesterday due to an oblique injury that we didn't know about until yesterday afternoon. This is not what you want to hear after you blew a ton of fab on him for your waivers. Tutu Atwell may be a thing, but the Rams are also going against a very solid San Francisco defense that pretty much held the Steelers to next to nothing in offensive scoring last week. So might have to wait another week on Puka to play out. Another guy that you might have to wait a week to play out is Jets running back Breece Hall. As good as he looked last week with that big 80-something yard run, he is going to remain on a snap count against the Dallas Cowboys. And this is a defense that just shut out the Giants and embarrassed them in epic fashion without Aaron Rodgers, with a bad offensive line, without really any semblance of a running game. I'm very concerned about Breece Hall's fantasy production this week. In some good news, since we've been all doom and gloom, Jerry Jeudy was removed from the injury report, so he should make his season debut against the Commanders on Sunday. We still don't really know how this Broncos offense is going to operate. They looked very sluggish last week. Marvin Mims was not a factor where a lot of people thought that he would be, but maybe getting Jeudy back in that lineup will light some fires under the proverbial butts of the Denver Broncos receiving corps. Jacoby Myers is still in concussion protocol for the Raiders and is doubtful for Sunday after taking that big hit. This opens the door for Devontae Adams, hopefully, to emerge as the wide receiver one on this team. Tight end Mark Andrews was limited in practice on Thursday, so he's uncertain to suit up for Sunday's game. Pat Freiermuth was limited with a chest injury. Panthers wide receiver DJ Chark was limited Thursday, so he could still miss another game in week 2. And Cowboys wide receiver Brandon Cooks is dealing with an MCL sprain that could cause him to miss some time. Jerry Jones said on 105.3 The Fan this morning that he is a true game time decision. So if you're planning on Brandon Cooks being in your lineup as a flex or even a wide receiver 3 option, that is something to monitor, especially in a very heavy positive game script situation. So I know we talked about the game a little bit last night, but I want to know if you guys got on the BetterCast app and played along the entirety of the game. If you haven't tried it yet, it is so much fun. BetterCast is gamifying the NFL game day on their BetterCast app, and you can join our free-to-play contest during the NFL games this Sunday. You predict what will happen. You can make picks, test your NFL knowledge. You can chat with our community about all the big plays, the top performers, and the busts in real time. So watch the NFL games with us this Sunday, play our free contest, and win prizes. All you need to do to play is download the free BetterCast app in the Apple Store or Google Play stores and create your account and join us on Sundays for all the games. I mentioned my waiver wire article on Fantasy Alarm earlier. If you don't have our All Pro subscription, what are you waiting for? You can get a 7-day free trial for our All Pro subscription today by going to fantasyalarm.com/allpro to sign up for that today. With that subscription, you get all of our seasonal content, all of our DFS content, every single sport, all of our seasonal tools, all of our DFS tools, everything that you need to dominate every aspect of fantasy is right there at your hands. So again, go sign up for your 7-day free trial on fantasyalarm.com/allpro today. So without any further ado, let's get into Friday Happy Hour. We have a very special guest here, Kyle Lindemann, if we can bring him in. Kyle, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing great. Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday.
It's DeAndre Swift Victory Friday, so doing good.
It is. Did you start him in any leagues or were
I
you?
did.
You did. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll take the L on that. I was convinced that it was going to be much more of a committee and that Hertz was going to have to throw a lot more.
hmm
Did his performance, exceed your expectations, or were you thinking that he was going to be the stud?
Well, So I have like two different home leagues. One, I didn't have him in because it's sleeper, and like I had two guys on IR that were questionable, and like sleeper freaking holds your lineup hostage if somehow they don't qualify for IR, so I couldn't put him in. But he actually could have had a 40-point game. He was tackled twice inside the one last night, so he honestly could have put up a 40 burger.
Yeah, it
But
was insane.
def- definitely exceeded expectations. I don't think any of us were kind of expecting him to play that much. We kind of expected it to be a three-man backfield, but it's pretty clear that, Rashad Penny's kind of the odd man out, unfortunately.
Yeah, do you think that Boston Scott getting hurt and being evaluated for a concussion helped Swift at all? Do you think when Boston Scott comes back, it's going to be a little bit different?
It's funny because I was talking with Adam Koffler this morning about it, and we were kind of projecting Swift 40 to 45%, Gainwell 40 to 45%, and probably Scott about 10 on some of the inside runs. So obviously, we kind of want above 50 for fantasy, but I think Swift has proven he can be efficient with limited touches. So Eagles offense is just so high powered that Swift at 50% is probably the same at like 70% in other offenses. So that's kind of how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I think it's different, right? After seeing the departure of Shane Steichen, that they're going to a much more run heavy approach. And it's just not exactly what we expected out of the Eagles, but they're still getting the job done. But just kind of part of the Friday happy hour thing, because I realized that I don't know who your favorite team is. And I feel like I should know this and I don't. So I want to know who your favorite team is and who you've kind of been gravitating towards for fantasy, even if it's a homer pick.
Yeah, I mean, I try to stay a little more neutral on Twitter just because the mobs, and I actually have a huge following of Bengals fans for some reason. Like me and Bengals fans like really gel, but my team's actually the Browns. I'm actually like a hardcore. I'm from Cleveland. I grew up in Cleveland, so I love the Browns. So that's actually my team, but I try not to be too much of a fanboy.
Yeah, I wondered if you were a transplant to Cleveland or if you actually, like the Browns or if you had a different team. I assumed it was the Browns, but I mean,
Yeah,
man, if you're in that Ohio kind of rivalry, what a
right,
great time to be a Browns fan against the
right.
Bengals.
And there's a lot of Steelers fans in like Eastern Ohio too, because once you get into Eastern Ohio, you're technically closer to Pittsburgh than you are to Cleveland. So there's a huge contingent.
Yeah, there definitely is. We actually have a huge contingent of Browns fans here in Arkansas as well, which is a little strange. Did not think that there would be many transplants in Arkansas, but yeah, Nick Chubb is my guy. So I've got to
Peyton
lean.
Hillis, former Brown.
Yes, yes. Oh man, the Madden curse. I can't even get into the Peyton Hillis and the Madden curse. So Michelle wants to know PPR flex needs ceiling out of Tutu, Lockett, Dotson, Mostert, or Shaheed because Madison did hurt last night. Madison was very bad last night.
Is this question for me?
Yeah.
I would probably say Dotson because they are playing the Broncos. Not the best matchup, but Terry McLaurin's probably going to draw Patrick Surtain. So Dotson gets the second corner. And don't know what the pace of play is going to be for that one, but I think he was like my mid-round breakout receiver this year, so I've really got high hopes for him.
I
Lockett
do
could, because that could be a really high-scoring game against the Lions. Probably one of those two, but I lean Dotson.
I do too. And I think that people are still sleeping on Detroit's secondary. After they promoted the defensive backs coach, their secondary really tightened up. And then the addition of Brian Branch as well. We already saw it in week 1 where he got that pick 6. This kid's going to be great. I think that they are going to really lock down on those Seattle wide receivers. And so I'm also leaning Dotson as well. But going back to happy hour, and I apologize, I'm about to sneeze. Uh, so if you had a favorite cocktail for happy hour, what would it be? And
Well,
what is it?
think our buddy Andrew Cooper will be happy to hear this. Probably an old fashioned for me because I'm definitely more of a bourbon guy.
Yes, I agree with that. There's nothing better than a good old fashioned. Now, do you like it with the cherry muddled or do you like a proper old fashioned?
I mean, I could do it either or, but I'm definitely more a cherry guy, so I'll take it.
Same. I'm the same way. Even as a bartender, people who like turn their nose up at the muddled, I'm like, y'all are just missing out. All right. So let's go ahead and move on to your week one running back leaders article that you do have over at rotoballer.com because I'm a little bit interested on your thoughts going into week two because Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, they both finished in the top 10. But do you think that this is the way that it's going to go the rest of the season, or is this eventually just going to be Robinson's backfield?
I do think it's going to be Robinson's backfield, but I do think Algier is probably the most valuable handcuff in fantasy. Like the difference between Bijan and Tyler Algier. I mean, yes, Bijan is an unbelievable talent, and I'm not going to say they're on the same level, but like Tyler Algier is a very good running back. And Arthur Smith, unfortunately, like he says, oh, yeah, the fantasy guys can worry about that. We won. Who cares? When Drake London puts a goose egg. But, he's very unpredictable. Atlanta's pace of play is tough. They don't run a whole lot of plays. They like to chew clock. So we have that working against us. Tyler Algier, I believe, got all 3 of the goal line touches last Sunday. So that's not ideal. But obviously, Bijan's first touchdown is like, oh my gosh, he just is unbelievable. I would say I'd probably say 60-40 Bijan. I don't know if Bijan's going to get a huge workload, but if Atlanta's offense is good, I think he'll be fine. I probably am not at the point where I'd start Algier yet, but he's definitely someone I would want on my roster because if something happened to Bijan, knock on wood, I think Algier would be a running back one every week.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you there. I'm a little bit on the fence about the usage because the Falcons had such a big lead against the Panthers that the game was already in hand. So I was like, did Arthur Smith plan on using Algier? Or was this just kind of a result of game script? And I haven't figured that out. And the line between the Packers and the Falcons have been moving back and forth and back and forth. Like the Packers will be favored by 1, then the Falcons will be favored by 1. I don't necessarily know if they get that luxury this week. So I think that we're going to get a lot more clarity on how Arthur Smith actually wants to split that backfield this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the hardest part about fantasy for the first couple of weeks of the season is we're trying to predict how these backfields and all these snap shares are going to shake out when we only have limited information. It's much easier to do when we get later in the season, but obviously for now, especially for DFS and other stuff, if you feel really confident in your predictions, there's a huge opportunity.
Oh, 100%. Doing the week 1 matchup previews and even the week 2 matchup previews, I'm like, okay, well, these stats don't really tell the entire story because game script was completely out of hand. So you're absolutely right. We will get a lot more clarity coming into, I would say week 4, I think is where everything's going to finally start settling. But sticking with the Packers and Falcons game, with Aaron Jones likely out, where are you ranking AJ Dillon this week?
I'd still say probably an RB2. I think he can be safe, like someone that could give you between like 12 and 15 points. I think he's a better running back than he gets credit for, but he has been kind of held back from Aaron Jones because like Aaron Jones is just still so explosive and he's such a good receiver. So he's kind of better at Dillon than both of those things, except for like short yardage. Now, Dillon could have a big game. So that's not to say that he couldn't. I just feel like he's not as much of an explosive runner. He kind of needs volume to be good. So if he gets 20 carries, yeah, I think we can put him as like a relatively safe RB2 with upside this week.
Yeah, and I wonder if, Christian Watson with Jones, with Dubs on a snap count again, if LaFleur is going to go back to that very run-heavy approach. But if they don't really have a backup, just how much running are they going to do? Or is it going to be Luke Musgrave possibly getting some of the work, which silently. I'm very in on about Luke
He could have had
Musgrave.
a touchdown last week. I
It
believe
was so close.
Love sailed it over his head.
Yep. No, I screamed at the TV when that happened. But hey, maybe this is the week that we get some Musgrave mania. But Sellers had a chat or a question in the chat, and I have to defer to you on this because he hears my opinion all the time. Who do you like better this week, Treylon Burks or Gabe Davis?
Well, oh man, they play the Raiders, huh? The Titans play the Chargers. Oh, those are just that's juicy matchups in both.
Mm-hmm. It's tough, especially with Hopkins out.
Yeah, I probably would lean Burks at this point.
I think so too.
I've loved him since college, so I feel like hopefully he's healthy, and I feel like he can go for 70 yards in any given play. I mean, Gabe can do the same thing. So, but if Hopkins isn't going to play, then for sure going.
And
Burks.
game script might be a little more in Burke's favor as well. I feel like we're going to get a bunch of James Cook in that Raiders Bills game. But can I also tell you how infuriated I was with the Titans' usage of Burks in week 1? I mean, he played the most snaps. He ran the most routes. Like, what is going on? I thought maybe they're managing him and taking him out. No, he was out there on the field. Tannehill just refused to look for him. And Hopkins was being covered by Marshawn Lattimore. So does that kind of skew you in one way or the other? Do you think that that was just because they were playing against the Saints, or do you think that Tannehill doesn't have a lot of trust in Burks yet?
Well, I think part of it's just the offense that they run. Like, we know everything's going to go through Derrick Henry. And I kind of posted this on Twitter, like when they signed D-Hop, was I think if we look at like Tennessee's like pass attempts the last like 6 years, they've been like 27th or fewer every year. They're just not going to throw the ball. This is not an offense that's predicated on throwing the ball 40 times a game. They have very good defense. They have a defensive-minded coach who tends to lean conservative. Like, everything's going to go through Derrick Henry. So my concern with Burks was, the passing volume not being there. At the same time, it's a pretty consolidated, I would say we probably don't have much faith in the Titans wide receiver 3 through wide receiver 6 on the depth chart. So it could be very hyper consolidated between those two, but I think that was my concern. Was I'm just worried about the big plays and the pass volume not being there. Because if the pass volume's not there, then we need Burks to rip off all these big plays, essentially.
Which he was great at Arkansas. His yards after the catch was wonderful, but he has to be targeted more than 3 times to be able to actually break these plays off. So, man, Tannehill.
And he's someone he's been banged up. I mean, ever since he came into the league, Burks seems like he's dealing with an injury every week. So there was even a chance he wasn't even going to play on Sunday. So I don't know if maybe he wasn't 100% yet. That's something to monitor.
Yeah, but even as an Arkansas fan, it feels like he was questionable every single week at Arkansas, and he played through it all the time. Like, he's a guy who's going to play through injury. The MCL just coming back as fast as he did from that was, testament to how great he is physically. Tannehill, if you're listening, I really, really need you to throw the ball to Treylon Burks. Please and thank you. Love you. Mwah. So as a Browns fan, let's move on to a question about them. Does losing Jack Conklin move the needle for you at all on Nick Chubb?
No, not really. I think my concern with Chubb is just more that he's never been a guy to get the big workload. Jerome Ford was pretty involved last week. Now, maybe that was because the Browns had the game pretty well in hand. The weather wasn't the best. I mean, I really liked DeJuan Jones as a prospect, and he fell to the 4th round on draft day, and he's looked pretty good, but still a rookie. He's going to get a little bit of a baptism by fire because I think he's going to draw TJ Watt on Monday night, which is not ideal. Yeah. But DeJuan Jones, pretty seasoned player. His issue is not going to be run blocking. His issue, because he's like 6'8", like 370 pounds, his issue is going to be like, how fast can this guy get off the block? Can he turn, against these smaller edge rushers? Does he have the twitch to be able to get low enough on those guys? As far as the run blocking is concerned, he's an animal. So I wouldn't worry at all for Chubb in that aspect.
That's the thing with some of those bigger offensive linemen is the taller ones tend to get out leveraged. And you made that very good point. Being 6'8", and being able to just jump up fast enough to prevent some of those really fast, like defensive linemen from coming at you. But yeah, Chubb is a beast. Absolutely in love with him. And I think that he could be the overall RB1 this year. So let's not
Yeah, he
count
had, I
him out
think,
there.
4 targets on Sunday, which is maybe not sustainable, but like I believe he's never really had more than like 30 something receptions in a season. So if Chubb is getting 4 targets a game on Sunday, that's a huge boost.
Yeah, the Chubb can't catch passes contingency
Mhm.
has been very silent. So I just want to hear from you guys. Anybody watching, if you're of the Chubb can't catch passes, won't get targets, please let me know in the chat what you thought of week one, or in the comments, because he can clearly catch passes.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't care if you're late to the party. It's great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. Rushman saying just in. Rogers just said seconds ago, do not rule him out this year. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, we're talking about a guy that's going to be 40 coming off an Achilles. And I've had, so I want to temper my expectations. I don't want to rule out Aaron Rodgers. I think people were getting at me on Twitter. I was like, hey, I think this recovery time is going to be a little harder than you guys think. And people are like, oh, he's a quarterback. He doesn't need his feet. I'm like, quarterback is all about your footwork. You've got to be able to like drive the ball off your back foot and your leg. And if your Achilles is messed up, I don't want to rule Rodgers out. I mean, the Jets are in a weird spot because they like restructured his deal. So his dead cap hit in 2024 is $66 million next year. It's actually 49 million in 2025, and it's still 35 million in 2026. So the Jets are like fully financially committed to Rodgers. Now, if he were to retire, they probably would go to like arbitration, and the Jets could get some of the fully guaranteed money back to like lower the cap hit. But like if Rodgers comes back and tries to play, they are really pot committed to Rodgers for the next like 2 years. So if he wants to play, then there's really not much they can do. But whether his body will allow him to, I just don't know. I mean, we're talking about a guy 40 years old. I know he's in great shape, but like Achilles is a tough injury.
And 40 is 40. Like it's just biologically tougher to come back from injury when you're at that age. And do you think that the Jets are going to push the issue, especially considering the fact that the picks that the Packers get are affected by how many games, how many snaps that Rodgers actually plays?
Yeah, so the Jets will likely keep their first round pick now for 2024, which is big.
Yeah, which is I don't see him coming back this season. I think he's going to be more of a mentor. If he wants to come back for one final year next year, possibly. Who knows? I just don't see it. Let's get to a couple of these questions real quick, and then we are going to debut Behind the Door. So Michelle asks, do you think Ford is the Chubb handcuff?
Yes. I mean, they have Pierre Strong, but he really didn't do much last week. They acquired him from New England. He's going to need a little time to learn the offense. The Browns really like Jerome Ford, so he's definitely one of the better handcuffs you can have. I don't think you can play him yet, but he's definitely someone I would want on my bench.
Yeah, I think that Ford is second or third to Tyler Algier as far as handcuffs go, with the way that backfield is shaking out. So I'm with you. Ann asks, if Aaron Jones is out, start Roshan, Mingo, Rashee Rice, or Njoku. PPR with no tight end premium.
I actually would lean Rashee Rice because I think that he could actually be the wide receiver 1 on the Chiefs this year. Roshan, I love, but the Bears' pace of play is low. And, Scott Barrett of Fantasy Points touched on this week because the Bears run so few plays that, I was talking about what kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier. Like Roshan, even if he got a 50% snap share, would only really be like a 30% snap share in an offense that runs a ton of plays. So I like Roshan, but the Bears backfield I don't want any piece of. Jonathan Mingo did not really impress last week. Their wide receiver room's crowded. I do like Njoku. I still feel like he's going to be more of a touchdown dependent tight end this year. I feel like we can project the most amount of volume for Rashee Rice to play in the Jaguars, which could be a shootout. So That's where I would lean. Jaguars Chiefs has the highest over under of the week. So you always want to think about that for fantasy. Like, how does Vegas project this game? So you'll have a lot more chances.
Yep, exactly. Let's go to having a hard time finding my flex this week. Godwin, Khalil Herbert, AJ Dillon, Nico Collins, or Pacheco.
I really liked how good Pacheco looked last Thursday night. Chiefs backfield probably still a little muddy for me. Nico Collins looked really good last week. They're playing, I think, they're playing the Colts this week, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't start Khalil Herbert yet for issues listed above. Man, I mean, you could go Godwin. Him and Mike Evans saw like a 50% target share between the two of them. I probably would lean AJ Dillon if Aaron Jones is out, just because you get that guaranteed floor. And then I would either go Godwin or Nico Collins.
Yep, I'm with you there. One last question, and then we'll get to behind the door. Anne asks, if Eckler sits, do I just roll with Kelly, or could start Dotson, Nico, or Pickens in PPR?
I would say if you feel like you're a huge, well, I think I'm rolling with Kelly. I mean, the last time Austin Eckler said to start his backup in fantasy worked out pretty well. Titans defense is good, but I mean, the Chargers have nobody else in that depth chart. I mean, for like 2 years, they've been trying to lighten Austin Eckler's load, and they haven't been able to because they haven't had anybody capable to do so. Kelly, this is his 4th year. I think he's finally healthy. He flashed a little bit in the preseason. I think I would go Kelly if Eckler is out. Otherwise, I think I'm definitely going with Dotson for sure.
Yep, same. And with Kellen Moore there, we've seen it, making 2 running backs relevant is a thing that he likes to do. Mm-hmm. And Austin Eckler is one of the most fantasy-friendly football players that we've ever seen. He is fully transparent, tells us everything. So if he's telling you to go get Kelly and start him, that's the guy I'm listening to. So I've already kept you for too long. It's been so fast already, but I want to play.
We got time.
The best game show since Let's Make a Deal. This one's called Behind the Door. So the way that this game works, you get stats for 3 players, some of which may not be complete. They may be holding out some tidbits of information. And you choose who you want to start on your fantasy team in week 2. So after the first one's revealed, you have the chance to keep them, or you can choose one final door and see if that player is a better choice. So are you ready to play?
Ready.
I'm kind of excited about this too. So, okay, we've got 3 scenarios here, or 3 players here. I centered around the running backs since you did the running back article over at Rotoballer. So player 1, this player had a 78.5% snap share in week 1, which was 5th most in the league, had 17 carries and 2 targets. This week, he's playing against a team that allowed the 3rd most points to the running back position in week 1.
Okay.
With player 2, this player only saw a 47.9% snap share in week 1, but he did have 18 carries with those snaps. This week, he plays a team that allowed 188 rushing yards. Are you willing to take a chance on the player behind door number 2? Finally, player 3, this player had a 70% snap share in week 1, but he was fairly inefficient with only 2.5 yards per carry. This week, he could be trending towards a bounce back against a team that allowed the most points to the running back position in week 1. So could player 3 be your guy? Which one are you taking?
Oh, man. Think about this for a second.
I'm telling you, it's sneaky.
We definitely want more than 2 targets, but at the same time, that's a pretty hefty snap share for number 1. I think I'm going to go player 1.
All right, Ernie, what's behind the door? Player number 1 is Rashad White. The snap share was great. The efficiency was not so great. But he does play a very good matchup this week, so he could bounce back. So are you relying on him to bounce back this week, or do you want to take your shot on player 2 or 3? It could be a boat. It could be a bag of garbage.
Well, I think I'm concerned because look how good DeAndre Swift looked against last night against the same defense. And I love Rachaad White as a receiver. He's unbelievable as a pass catcher. As an inside runner, he was like one of the least efficient running backs last year. So I think
it was like we say in Arkansas about Mississippi. Rachaad White said that about Cam Akers. Thank God for Cam
I'm going to
Akers.
go player 3.
Player 3. All right, Ernie, what's behind the door?
Swamp it. Yeah.
Player 3 is Jamal Williams of the.
Oh.
And you were going to be so mad when I reveal player 2. You were going to be so mad. Ernie, can we reveal player 2, please? It is Nick Chubb.
Might be time to retire.
It is Nick Chubb. And again, this is it's a great exercise in kind of taking the whole picture, and just cherry picking stats doesn't tell the totality of fantasy production. So I kind of set you up with that one. I'm sorry. I'm a horribly mean host, and you're probably never going to want to come on the show again.
Coop's not going to let me live this one down.
Right. But would you forgive me and be willing to play one more scenario behind the door to redeem yourself? All right. So in this scenario, we stuck with wide receivers. So player 1, this receiver only played a 48% snap share and saw an 18.5% target share in week 1. And in week 2, he plays against a team that allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver position. Player 2, this receiver had a 90% snap share and ran 100% of his team's routes. He does have a tougher matchup this week, though, with a team that allowed only 19 total fantasy points to wide receivers in week 1. Player 3. Our final player played 84% of the snaps, but had a monster target share of over 40%. However, this week he gets a tougher matchup against a team that only allowed 14.6 fantasy points to wide receivers. Are you willing to take a chance on player 3? Which door would you like to choose?
Oh. If I pick 1 or 2, do I get the option of going to 3 if I don't like it, or is it only one-time deal?
It's only one-time deal. You can only swap out once. I know it's tough. And I'm being sneaky again, remember.
All right, I'm going to go with door number 2.
All right, Ernie, what's behind door number 2? Drake London, the big zero burger guy, has a matchup with Jair Alexander this week. Don't necessarily know how the Falcons are going to utilize that offense. Are you confident in Drake London, or would you like to see what's behind door number 1 or door number 3?
I mean, I really like Drake London as a talent. It just goes back to like Arthur Smith. Like, we just don't know what he's thinking. Their pace of play is low. Like, they definitely need to be at like 30 pass attempts a game. I just don't know if I see them getting there. So he's definitely going to have a couple of good weeks, but it's very scary for fantasy because of you're just getting a 0 from a guy. I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah.
So
I can tell you won't go wrong with either one. It'll just be a ceiling issue, if that helps.
I think we'll go with door number 3.
All right, Ernie, who's behind door number 3? You get the shiny rookie and Zay Flowers. You win the boat.
Okay, we'll take that.
Zay Flowers was probably the only highlight of that entire Ravens offense. What are your thoughts on him going forward with Mark Andrews being back?
Well, I think I looked at he played 42% out wide. He played 58% from the slot. Now, he can play both to his credit. He's very versatile. My only thing is if he's playing more slot, how does that look when Mark Andrews is technically both going to occupy the same area of the field to some degree?
Mm-hmm.
So He had a couple of screen plays, so they definitely manufactured more touches for him in week 1. And I've loved Zay Flowers ever since he came out. Like, he just plays so much bigger than he looks. His footwork is incredible. He has a great feel for like where the DBs are. He finds the hole in the zone. He gets down. So I love Zay Flowers, but we still don't know how this our Ravens offense is going to look. Maybe Rashad Bateman's the odd man out now, which by week 1 kind of looked that way. Yeah. So I would say I'm optimistic for Zay Flowers, but like just want to be mindful of the other factors.
Yeah, 100%.
How does it look when Andrews is back would be my only concern.
Yep. And with Odell Beckham Jr. being out there for so many of the routes and just not getting any targets, is he eventually going to get some of those targets is also a concern. Would you like to know what you could have won behind door number 1?
Sure.
Okay. You're like, Ernie, what's behind door number 1? This is Romeo Dubs.
They're probably pretty close.
The snap share was a little misleading. But like I said, once you picked London and had your option between 1 or 3, you weren't going to be disappointed with either one. It was just an issue of a stealing. So how do you feel about Dubs going into, week 2 and the rest of the season even?
Yeah, I mean, I really like him. I mean, he was a good player in college. He probably fell a little too far in the draft last year. Kind of got overshadowed because they took him in the 4th round. They took Watson in the 2nd round. But his skill set is completely different than Watson. Watson's this big, explosive, like big play guy, take the top off of defense. Dobbs is like awesome at the contested catch. Like, he's so good at just like turning around the back shoulder throw. He just plucks it away from the DB. So they don't really do the same things. And then, Jaden Reed kind of playing the slot plus Musgrave. So they've got an impressive array of skill players that hopefully Jordan Love could grow with. I do like Dobbs. He would definitely be a must start for me if Watson doesn't play.
I think so too. I'm in agreement with you. But thank you so much for indulging all of my silly game show fantasies. This concludes Behind the Door. Have your pet spayed or neutered or whatever the catch line is for Behind the Door. And Kyle, we've run out of time. I'm so sad, but it's time to let you go. Please let everybody know what you've got coming up, where they can find you, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm working on kind of my waiver wire stashes. So maybe not necessarily players to spend fab on, but like someone you want to target like ahead of time so you don't have to spend fab. Maybe one guy would be Chuba Hubbard from the Panthers. Mm-hmm. So I'll have that coming out, working on injuries. Just have a lot of good stuff coming out during the season, try to be like a helpful guide. Look is made FF on Twitter. So looking forward to the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I can't wait to have you back closer towards the end of the season, and especially in NFL draft prospect season, because I know that's something that you're heavily involved with, and I'm also a very huge nerd when it comes to that. So we'll definitely have you back on. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great weekend.
Take care, Britt.
Oh, man. As you guys know, Britt's Fantasy Blitz is sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. And if you haven't played Underdog Fantasy offers new contests and chances to win every single day. You can play their Pick'em contest by choosing higher or lower on 2 to 5 of your favorite players' stats. The more you pick, the more you can win. You can choose from MLB, NFL, PGA, and more sports. Underdog Fantasy also offers daily fantasy drafts with leagues ranging from 2 to 12 players. And now there is a brand new way to play Underdog Fantasy. You can now make picks during the game with their new in-game pick'em. All you need to do is sign up at fantasyalarm.com/underdog, use promo code ALARM, and first-time depositors get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Again, that's fantasyalarm.com/underdog with the promo code ALARM. Another thing that Underdog is doing that just launched this week, they are giving away $2 million this NFL season by introducing $100,000 Sundays. Now, how you play this, each week, a $100,000 plus pot will be up for grabs to those who submit a pick'em entry with a pre-designated player. We begin this week with $10,000 to 10 different winners. And this week, the entry and the player is Tua Tagovailoa. If you make a pick'em entry with Tua included, you get automatically entered for a chance at $10,000. And who can say no to $10,000, right? Definitely not me. But of course, you want to make your picks before the game too. So let's talk about a few that are available before week 2. First, I'm doubling down on Calvin Ridley. I told y'all he was going to have a great week last week. He absolutely just shot sky high. His stat is set at 68 and a half receiving yards. I'm going to go higher against the Chiefs with a game that is supposed to be basically a boat race to the end. There's going to be a ton of passing. Ridley is going to do so well in this game. Higher all the way for him right here. Secondly, I'm going to go with Jamar Chase. His stat is set at zero point 0.5 rushing plus receiving touchdowns. I'm going to go higher here. I know that he underwhelmed last week against the Browns, but now they have the Ravens, who Marcus Peters is questionable. Their safety is questionable. There are a bunch of injuries in this Ravens secondary, and the Bengals are going to be looking to make a comeback and have all the pressure off their backs after everybody talked about their disastrous week 1 performance. So I think Jamar Chase gets into the end zone this week. Third, I'm going to go Luke Musgrave. His stat is set at 49 and a half receiving yards, or 32 and a half, excuse me. I'm going to go higher with Christian Watson and Aaron Jones potentially out, most likely out. Romeo Doubs again on a snap count. I think that Luke Musgrave does become the guy. We saw last week he almost had a touchdown. He had that very long pass that was just dropped very close to the end of completion. He's going to get there this week. I'm going higher there. Fourth, I'm going to go Drake London. We talked about it in the behind the door segment. His stat is set at 49 and a half receiving yards, and I'm going to go lower. I don't think that Atlanta passes the ball enough to get him to this threshold. And a very tough matchup with Jair Alexander is also going to dictate and kind of lower his expectations. So we're going to stick with the lower on him. Finally, we're going to go with James Cook, 50 and a half rushing yards. I'm going to go higher. After getting embarrassed by the Jets on Monday Night Football, the Bills are going to be in full on revenge mode against the Raiders. I think that this positive game script is going to lend itself to a bunch of running, and James Cook looks very good. 50 and a half, I'm taking the higher all day long. So that wraps up our underdog picks of the day. Again, to sign up, go to underdog.com slash or fantasyalarm.com/underdog. Use the promo code ALARM. First time users get a 100% deposit match up to $100. Along with these pick'em contests, they're running weekly contests and battle royales. There is honestly something for everyone. So get on over there to Underdog and check it out. Guys, thank you so much for joining us in the chat. If you have any more questions, real quick before the end, throw them in there. Again, go to fantasyalarm.com, sign up for that All Pro package. That way you can get my weekly waiver articles, my weekly matchup previews, all of our DFS tools, all of our seasonal content, every single sport that we have to offer. Go to fantasyalarm.com/allpro. And again, if you haven't downloaded the Bettercast app, we are gamifying the NFL game day on the Bettercast app. You get your chance to play head to head with other participants in the chat. If you win tickets that you can redeem for prizes on Fanatics. You can chat with our community. It is everything that you want. And I can tell you from experience, it is so much fun. So to download the free Bettercast app, go to the Apple Play and Google Play stores and download it for free today. Guys, after this show, make sure that you stay tuned from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern for the Fantasy Football Game Show from Front Yard Fantasy. From 4 to 5 Eastern, the Better Sports Betting Show with Dan Servadidio and Howard Bender. From 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern, the MLB DFS live stream with James Grande and John Impemba. And as I mentioned earlier, if you guys have any starter sit questions that we didn't get through today, join myself and John Impemba on the Better Sports Network at 9 a.m. on Sunday mornings. And we will be going through all the injuries, all the updates, all the inactives, all of your starter sits, the weather, anything that you guys want on Sunday morning. We will be in that show answering. So make sure that you tune in for that. At 10 a.m. Eastern, tune in to Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio for Howard Bender and Andrew Cooper doing their start sit show. And then they're bringing it all full circle from 11 a.m. with Andrew Cooper and John and Pemba answering your last minute questions again on Better Sports Network. Brad McCoy, one quick question here. After his performance, should I be starting Swift, have Gibbs and Aaron Jones? I think that that's still going to be a committee. Come back and let's talk about it after this week. Let's see what Gibbs' usage is going to be after Dan Campbell said that he needs to be more involved in that offense. So let's put a pin in that just real quick. That's our show for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you Monday with Bo McBrayer from Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros for our own spin on Hot Ones, as well as recapping all of the Week 2 action. So join us then. Y'all have a great weekend. Enjoy NFL Sunday. And as always, thanks for getting blitzed.